Joshua or Ruiz, repeat or revenge? Those are the questions. This is After the Bell, Mirror Fighting's boxing show in association with Betfair.
It's the WBA heavyweight champion of the world.
Move like a butterfly and sting like a bee.
Welcome to After the Bell. There is only one show in town this week. Anthony Joshua, Andy Ruiz, the rematch, the sequel, number 2 in Saudi Arabia, of course. I'm joined by my colleague Rich Jones to look ahead to what promises to be an intriguing, enthralling fight on Saturday night. Rich, let's start by looking back at the first fight. Of course, for those who have forgotten, Andy Ruiz stepped in 6 weeks' notice when Jarrell Miller failed a plethora of drug tests. He looked overweight, out of shape. Easy night for Joshua. Didn't work out that way. Was it a case of Andy Ruiz was just much better than we thought, Joshua was worse than we thought, or a combination?
I think it's a combination of the two. I mean, watching the fight back the other day, even knowing the result now, you watch it back and you look at the two men's stature, their body composition, you're like, there's no way Andy Ruiz can beat Anthony Joshua just looking at them on face value. And I think we all sort of fell into that trap a little bit, especially when it came to the weigh-in, especially with it being at short notice. But I think when you look at it with the benefit of hindsight, you can always see that Andy Ruiz can fight. We saw that on the night, and he's got a better pedigree than he was given credit for. But at the same time, I think Anthony Joshua just didn't turn up on the night. He got caught with that big shot that he never recovered from in the third round. And I think it was a combination of the two, really. Joshua was below par first time round, but Ruiz was definitely a lot better than he was given credit for. And I think that's why going into the rematch, it's so interesting. No one can call it, because although we can speculate on it being a mix of the two, no one really knows after the first fight what the reason for that huge upset was. I mean, there's a reason that Ruiz was such an outsider. So it's going to be really interesting to see this weekend, work out whether it was a case of Joshua just being way below par, or whether Ruiz really is, a lot better than he was given credit for before that fight.
I think I'm right in saying the judges gave the first couple of rounds to Joshua. But at least when I watched it back, he never really looked comfortable. He was on the back foot from the first bell. There were a lot of conspiracy theories about what might have happened beforehand, but we can't prove them. So I don't think he was ever really ready for it.
No, I think it's one of those. I don't think Anthony Joshua, from what we gather from him personality-wise, I don't think he would have actively been complacent. I think if you spoke to him beforehand all the time, he was saying he's a tough opponent. I think he meant all of that. But I think, as people have said before, subconsciously, it must have been hard for him not to buy into everyone telling him it was going to be an easy defence. And obviously he prepared for Jarrell Miller as well. And I think from watching it back, especially, I mean, there was a lot said about his ring walk and the biting on the gum shield, and, maybe he wasn't quite right. But I think, personally, I think his focus was wrong. I think he was focused on, because he thought it was a foregone conclusion, he was going to win the fight. Everyone thought it was a foregone conclusion, especially after Deontay Wilder had blown out Dominic Breazeale a couple of weeks earlier. Everything was being talked about the Wilder match after beating Ruiz. I think he was going in their American debut so desperate to be, super cool, relaxed, put on a show, just breathe through it, that he kind of lost sight of the fact he had a really dangerous guy in front of him. And like you say, he got given the first couple of rounds, I think, but I think that was more, it was a really tense start where people are sort of feeling it out. And in those situations, the judges are usually going to go with the champion because he's the proven guy. But yeah, right from the off, he just never really got going, really. Obviously, he put Ruiz down, but he had those 10 seconds where he put Ruiz down, and then before he got caught with a shot, were probably the only 10 seconds where you thought Anthony Joshua really looked in control of the fight.
You mentioned, obviously, that was the third round, which actually put Ruiz down with a great combination. But then Ruiz took a right hand, a very good right hand flush, carried on. He never looked hurt. And then, of course, he caught and dropped Joshua twice in that round. And I think someone said to me the other day, although it wasn't a knockout of Joshua, obviously, but that one punch that caught him just behind the ear probably scrambled his senses and actually never really looked like he recovered. No,
his legs were never there after that. And it's, on one hand, you say, he got caught with one punch and that can happen to anyone. But on the other hand, we were discussing earlier off air that it was a similar left hook to what caught him against Dillian Whyte when he was in a lot of trouble. They're probably the two toughest situations he's been in his career. I know he went down against Klitschko, but that was really late on. He came back well, but he got caught with that sort of left hook to the top of the temple against Ruiz. It happened to him against Dillian White, and he managed to get back and get through that. But you've got to worry, especially against Ruiz, who showed how good he was with that left hook, that a similar thing could possibly happen again. And like you say, it scrambled Joshua, whereas when Ruiz went down, he got caught on the back of his heels by a good combination, but he was straight back on his feet, and you never thought he's in real trouble here. Whereas, like you say, Joshua was, from that first knockdown, he was in trouble from the off. He never got his legs back, and the pace slowed down a bit in the 5th and 6th round, which suited him. But as soon as Ruiz went back up a pace, he just couldn't handle it, really.
And of course, Ruiz put him down another twice in the 7th round, and then the referee steps in, and, well, history was made. The question now, we've had 6 months since that first fight. There was never any doubt in Joshua's mind that he would take the rematch. It looked set for Cardiff. He's now in the desert of Saudi Arabia, controversially. Is it enough time for Joshua to have fixed? He says he's fixed whatever it was wrong. He won't tell anyone what was wrong. Is it enough time for him to have worked out a way to deal with a very tricky customer?
I'm not sure. That's one of the reasons this fight's so interesting at the weekend, because it's really hard to tell. And it wasn't the first time we'd seen Joshua have problems against a smaller fighter. I went to the Takam fight in Cardiff, and he wasn't at his best against Carlos Takam, who I think's like 6'1", 6'2". Ruiz, again, he struggled to size him up with the jab, and he never really, I don't know if it was a game plan thing or whether it was just a struggle, but he seems to have gone back to the drawing board. He's drafted in a lot of new names for his training camp. He's sparred a lot of shorter guys. So he clearly seems to have recognised the issues and tried to address them. And I think it's important to note that he wasn't preparing for Andy Ruiz the first time around. He was obviously preparing for a fight with Jarrell Miller. So with a full training camp, preparing for Ruiz, knowing what he's going to face, I'd like to think he could have sorted it out. I'd like to think Rob McCracken in his corner is the perfect man to sort those issues. But at the same time, he's always been playing catch on the boxing side of things. He started the sport late, whereas Ruiz, it's been said a lot, but Ruiz has been fighting since he was a kid. Joshua is sort of an athlete who became a boxer late on, sort of thing. But I think he needs to have worked on his boxing sort of fundamentals. He needs to have worked on timing that jab. And I'm interested to see what game plan he comes in with this time around, because he fought on the back foot a lot against Ruiz, and that didn't really work for him. And he's got the reach advantage. He's a taller man. I'd like to see him be a bit more positive this time. It'd be interesting to see in the first round or two what game plan Joshua comes in with to try and solve the issues he had first time around. And
of course, for Andy Ruiz, who has gone from taking the first fight at 6 weeks' notice when he was presumably chilling out, doing very little, had no plans to fight, someone's given him $7 million for that, regardless of what happens. Then he finds himself, well, obviously he earns himself those 3 world title belts. He's living the life of a champion now. He's suddenly in demand. There is a good chance, is there not, that he has sort of fallen into the trap, as so many do, of enjoying that lifestyle too much. Yeah, I mean, he certainly seems to have been enjoying his lifestyle since he won that fight, and who can blame him? He earned it. It was an unbelievable performance from him the first time around. But we talk obviously about Joshua's mindset and how he approaches it as a challenger this time around, but I think it's going to be interesting for Ruiz as well. He went into the first fight as a massive underdog. He knew he was the underdog. He knew no one was giving him a chance. And when he got knocked down, I mean, he said it in his interview straight after, he got up and thought this is once in a lifetime, went for broke and caught Joshua with that big shot. This time around, it's very different. He's got a lot more pressure. He knows that he's got those 3 belts. He knows he can compete with Joshua. So it's going to be interesting to see how his approach changes, given that, the roles are reversed kind of thing. It's going to be interesting to see how he approaches it. One thing I think that will be very important is the mental side. Joshua presumably went into the first fight, if he was okay, confident, as you say, probably bought into the fact that Ruiz was stepping in at late notice, wasn't going to put up much of a fight. Ruiz probably thought, hang on, here's $7 million. Let's be honest, I'm not expected to win, no pressure. Now you've got the situation where Joshua's going into it, maybe he feels better, but once he gets into that ring, suddenly he's faced with those same problems. They're bound to come back to him. He's bound to have some sort of recollection and some memory, maybe a nightmare even, of when Ruiz starts to come towards him. That's going to be a big factor. Yeah, it is. I think
obviously there's a lot of talk as well about the rematch being back at Madison Square Garden. I think from Joshua's point of view, that would have probably been the worst case scenario. I know he talked a lot about trying to sort of go back and right the wrongs kind of thing, but I think being in the exact same place wouldn't have been the right scenario for him. So possibly being in Saudi Arabia will help in that regard. In fact, it's a different setting, but like you say, it's he's going to be faced with some of the same problems, and I guess it's just him having that faith deep down that he's solved the issues and knowing that he knows how to address it in those scenarios. And a lot was made of his interactions with Rob McCracken in the corner of the first fight, and some of the questions he was asking seemed a little strange to some people. You know, what should I do now? What do you think he's going to do? Should I throw this shot? And in the first fight, he didn't really seem to have he didn't really seem to have too much of a game plan, or at least he didn't seem to be comfortable with the game plan or what he should be doing. So it needs to, I mean, obviously every training camp's important, but this training camp needs to have been spot on for Anthony Joshua from a boxing point of view if he's going to have that, that real belief that he knows how to deal with Ruiz. Because if he's confident in himself that he's come up with the answers, then I think, he'll have some sort of recollections from the first fight. But if Ruiz comes at him and he knows, I've got this in my locker, I know what to do to deal with this, then you'd imagine he should be able to do that. He's got the physical, he's a specimen physically, he's got the size advantage, he's got some power. But I think it all comes down to how much he really believes he's solved the issues in training camp.
But on the flip side, of course, Ruiz goes into this fight knowing he can take Joshua's best shots and stay standing and come forward and then do damage himself. That must be in itself a huge thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued to know, because Ruiz ate up some big shots. He caught a pretty big left hook in, I think, the second round, and then obviously he got put down but got up and didn't look too damaged. Then he caught a couple more shots straight after the knockdown. He got hit with another one as well, and he seemed okay. But then after putting Joshua down, even when Joshua was scrambled, he seemed to sit off a bit for the next couple of rounds. So even though he didn't look hurt, I'm intrigued to know how much Ruiz respects Joshua's power, because he went for it straight after the knockdown, but then there was a couple of rounds where he sort of sat off and seemed to be patient, didn't want to get caught with anything, which obviously is sensible. But I'm intrigued to see how much Ruiz really respects Joshua's power. And I'm also intrigued to see what Joshua's power looks like, given that he seems to have cut down muscle, trimmed a bit of weight. But Ruiz has got to have all the confidence of knowing that he's been there, done it, and knows he can beat him this time. It's going to be, like we say, it's going to be a mental as well as a physical battle, I think.
Of course, the fight is in Saudi Arabia. The Eddie Hearn Matchroom promotional spiel is well underway. It has a Starbucks, it has a Gucci, so therefore, what's the problem? But, it is a serious point which will be overlooked by everyone involved in the fight. Should we be taking a sporting event of this magnitude to a country with a, at best, dubious human rights record?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, look, the one thing I feel like should be pointed out is because of the magnitude of the event, Eddie Hearn and Matchroom and Anthony Joshua are getting a lot of the flack, but they're not the first people to do it. They won't be the last. There's obviously it's been the season for that region of Saudi Arabia. They had Formula E there a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, Amir Khan fought in Saudi Arabia before. Tyson Fury was doing WWE in Saudi Arabia a few weeks ago. But there are obviously questions to be asked. It's a tricky one. I mean, there's been a lot said from Eddie Hearn that, look, I'm a boxing promoter, I'm not a politician, it's not my place, but they're the sort of people that, have the power to sort of make a stand and do something about it. And I think it's a bit, it doesn't entirely sit right with me that sports people just sort of wash their hands of it. It's not our problem. They won't be the first, they won't be the last. But I think more than anything, it's a bit of a shame for the spectacle that's in Saudi Arabia as well, because, I mean, I think they're going to put on a show. They're going to pull out all the stops. But in terms of the supporters that are going there, I mean, obviously the fans have played such a huge part in the growth of Anthony Joshua, the brand he's become. 90,000 people at Wembley for the Klitschko fight, and all the people packing into Cardiff for the fights and things like that. Even going back to his earlier fights at the O2, he always brought a huge following. So it's a shame for the a fight of that magnitude, there's so much excitement going into it from the people watching from afar that are we going to see that same energy, that same excitement from the people that are probably not huge boxing fans, or a lot of people going to be there that probably haven't got a boxing background, that are there for the event rather than the matchup? I think the event will probably lose something from that perspective. You know, in Madison Square Garden, so many Brits flew over to New York, made a weekend of it. They didn't get the result they wanted, but the atmosphere was electric. You could see it came through the TV screen how much energy was in the arena. You got that from whenever Anthony Joshua was fought in the UK. Are you going to get that in Saudi Arabia? I'm doubtful, and that to an extent takes a little bit away from the occasion.
You certainly won't get an alcohol-fueled rendition of Sweet Caroline, that's for sure. Let's talk outcomes now. It seems that, obviously the fight can go many ways. Is the most sensible thing for Joshua to do just to keep it long and just basically to get the victory however he can, which might mean going the 12-round distance?
Yeah, I think he's got to do whatever he can to win. It's as simple as that. I think in the first fight I touched on earlier, I think he maybe got caught up in needing to put on a show, needing to impress on his US debut, thinking that he was going to win the fight. It was a case of how he won the fight. This time around, it's just win the fight. Do whatever you've got to do to win the fight. He's cut down a bit of his muscle mass and weight. You'd like to think that'll help his stamina to go the distance against Andy Ruiz, who, as everyone knows, doesn't look to be in the best shape. I mean, he can fight. He's proved he can go the distance in the past, but if it goes into those tough, hard rounds, you'd like to think Joshua will probably have a bit more of an advantage. But again, it really could go either way. I'm intrigued to see if Joshua comes out firing, tries to end it early to really make a massive statement. I think if he was to do that, it'd be a mistake. I think he needs to play the long game. He needs to try and establish his jab, try and control the fight a bit more, and just don't get caught. At the end of the day, he switched off and got naive in the first fight, and that was what caused the big left hand that he never recovered from. So he needs to just be patient, don't do anything silly, take it into the 8th, 9th round, and then if you feel you've got the advantage, try and maybe pick up the pace.
So with Betfair, Andy Ruiz is 2-1 to repeat his shock. Anthony Joshua 4-9. If you do think it'll go the distance, Joshua is 9-2 to win by unanimous decision. If you think it'll go early, he's 12-5 to win in the first 6 rounds, but you think maybe in the middle rounds?
Yeah, I could see a similar sort of situation. I mean, we've seen in the past that Joshua tends to get a little bit tempted to get caught into a tear-up when he probably shouldn't, when it gets to it. So it happened against Ruiz. Obviously, the 3rd round was chaotic. He knocked Ruiz down, then went for the kill, got himself knocked down. He's been in that situation. There was a crazy round against Klitschko where they went down. He got caught into a bit of a tear-up against Dillian Whyte. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him go in there with the right intentions and try and sort of bide his time. But I think as soon as Ruiz did the same, obviously, when he got knocked down. So I think as soon as one of them lands a big punch, which is going to happen at some stage, I think then all hell's going to break loose, and we'll probably get a stoppage either way in the mid-rounds. I think rounds 5 to 8 possibly.
Yeah. 5 to 8 for Joshua is 13-5 with Betfair. Let's just touch on the undercard. The chief support is Alexander Povetkin against Michael Hunter. Plenty of heavyweight action, most notably probably for his sort of appearance in Saudi Arabia rather than the fight itself. Dillian Whyte takes on Marius Vac. Of course, Whyte's still under a cloud from the abnormal drug test which he had before his fight in summer. It's never been explained adequately. It seems a bit silly, perhaps, to be putting him on a fight, to put him in front of cameras again when he can't explain what happens, Eddie Hearn can't explain what happens. Nobody really knows. Yeah,
it's a crazy situation. I think no one really knows the true facts, and regardless of the reasons for that, I think you've got to question. I mean, no, I don't really know who to blame, but you've got to question the handling of the situation in the fact that everyone is so in the dark. And like you say, it's going to be really good to see Dillian Whyte back out in the ring. Probably what he needs to sort of clear his head and just get on with things again. But he's never really going to be able to move on with his career, especially in terms of having the, the public know. The public are going to... People need to know what's happened, essentially. Whatever the truth is, whatever has gone on. Then there just needs to be more transparency so that Dillian Whyte can move on with his career. Everyone can move on with his career knowing how to handle it, really.
Absolutely. Well, that is all we have time for this week. We'll be back next week, of course, to look back at the rematch and to discuss what's next for Joshua and Ruiz.
You can't hide. Everybody is watching you.
I thought he was almost unbeatable at cruiserweight. Particularly in boxing, you need a different mindset to be a champion.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Despite all the people around you, when you step through those ropes, you're on your own. Boxing is dramatic. It's compelling. It's unpredictable.
I've always been willing to die in the ring, and I've said it before, and I know this could be it. It's life and death.
A boxer will win and win and win, and then all of a sudden it happens. Something they thought would never happen. They lose a fight.